Hey, Peter.
Hey, man.
How's it going?
Great. How are you?
I'm doing good. Okay, so I'm going to send this link out now to the big group of people.
Okay.
And hopefully we'll get some folks in here.
Cool. Cool.
Hello.
Hello. Hey, Steven.
Hey, Steven. Hi.
I'm going to get my earphones.
It's all working. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's a new system they're working out. Just give it a few minutes for people to join and stuff.
Yeah, there's wicked echo from somewhere.
Is it me?
Yeah, it might be you.
Mute yourself for a second, Steven.
Okay, hold on.
Hello? No echo anymore?
Are you mute, Steven?
Yeah, so it's
that
probably...
was it.
Do you have headphones of any kind, like even for like a phone or something that you could use? Because I think it's the delay. I think it's the delay.
How are things going there? Really busy, huh, Sean?
Oh, yeah, it's completely packed. It's fantastic.
Awesome.
There's we literally had to stop letting people in the door, and because we ran out of cups, and also because the bars are so packed that people can't get up to the front to hear what's happening or get coffee or anything. So we basically just put a cap at the door and said, okay, 2 people out, 1 person in, 2 people out, 1 person in.
Yeah.
And it's helping a bit. It's starting to low down, but yeah, the line's going all the way out to the end of the corner now. And
Far out.
Yeah.
You need a velvet rope, man.
And it's snowing, and like there's ice and stuff, and people are like, I'm waiting for my coffee. It's fantastic. I know, it's pretty awesome. I'm going to jump over real quick and just cross-post this so people know that this is happening.
Sure.
But you guys can feel free to chat behind my back.
Yeah. You get it yet, Stephen Vick?
How's everything with you, Peter?
Spectacular. Yeah, it's been a really big week. Yeah, that sounds a lot better, Stephen.
Oh, I can't hear anything.
Oh. Are you? You in yet, Stephen? Nope, he can't hear yet.
Testing.
We can hear you, Stephen. We can hear you.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Stephen. What are reindeer, by the way?
So, what are reindeer?
Yeah, it says reindeer.
Where?
Up in the upper left of the Google, like the chat room, whatever the Hangout room. It says chat, screen share, and reindeer. I bet reindeer is the thing that makes different.
I don't have reindeer. I have chat, invite, and screen share.
Okay, so maybe the clients have a reindeer button.
Oh, when you click that, it throws up a big red button from my screen. So maybe it's like Rudolph's nose or something.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like saying you want to talk or something.
Oh, okay, like a crazy.
I know. Could you hear me now? Okay.
Yes, we can hear you fine.
Fantastic.
I know that Corey Bush is trying to get on.
Yeah, I know. He has to go and join from my profile, unfortunately.
I'm trying to tell him. He's in Uganda right now.
Yeah, see, it's a little tricky because Coffee Common is like a brand page, but you can't have a Hangout from a brand page. You have to have them from individual accounts. So we're doing a Coffee Common Hangout, but I'm organizing it from my. So it's like it's a little tricky. It's brand new. They're trying to work out the kinks. When it works, it's awesome. So, we're trying to lay out the instructions, but it's not point and click simple. I'm getting notifications of something happening, so I don't know if people are joining. I mean, I know that I can see the. There we go. There's Corey. Does he have a camera? Do we know, or is he?
He should, yeah.
Because I got I'm getting a notice that he has joined, but I don't see a camera stream coming from him.
I just asked him.
Here's hi, Steven. Steve.
Hello.
Brian, how's it going?
Good. How are you guys?
Good.
Where are you calling from, Steven?
I'm in Syracuse, New York.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very cool.
You should drive down and be here in person. You're not that far.
I would.
Is it snowing up there in upstate?
It did last night. Yeah, we got like 4 inches. So I haven't shoveled my car off yet today. I'm not excited about doing that.
Yeah, cool.
It's snowing here in Chicago. People started putting the chairs out today for the first time.
Oh, I remember when I lived in Chicago. So people throw down over those chairs.
The chairs, man. I gotta take a bunch of pictures because they're so ridiculous.
What's the deal with the chairs?
People take old house chairs and block their and reserve their parking space, which is just a street parking space, because they've dug out their car.
Oh, right.
So when there's a big storm, the whole street will be covered with all these old, like, crappy chairs. Some people take like cinder blocks and wood and like make a barricade.
Wow.
Yeah, and if you take somebody else's like chair spot, you're getting a brick through the window, because like people are very, very protective of those spots.
One of the Intelli service guys got back from a job at like 2 o'clock in the morning last year. Driving around, couldn't find anywhere by his place to park, and finally like, screw it, I'm going to be up at 7 in the morning, I'm taking this chair spot, I need to park. Took the spot and had the nastiest letter by like 6 in the morning on his windshield about how dare he, and don't be lazy, and all of this stuff.
So lucky that he just got a window. When I used to live in Ukrainian village, like seriously, people would just like wait. Like old Russian guys would just like sit on a stoop and wait for the person to come back.
Yeah, that's where he is, the Ukrainian village. I bet they were waiting for him.
All right. Well.
Yeah, I mean, we might as well chat a little bit here.
Yeah.
And so Corey is in the chat. I mean, he keeps joining and not joining, but I don't think he has a camera, or maybe he
does have a camera. He says he can't see anything. He's still working on it.
I mean, I guess that we're getting into technical troubleshooting on some level. He should probably be using Chrome as a browser for this to work best, but I mean, it's not required, but it is a Google product, and all that sort of stuff. But I mean, I see him in the chat window here.
Yeah.
And he's joining and leaving and joining and leaving.
Yeah, he's in Uganda, so that's probably might have something to do with it. And
yeah, I'm just gonna blame that.
He's switching to Chrome, so he'll try to rejoin.
All right, maybe he'll join.
Jump back in.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess the thing that we could talk about, and Steven, you're a coffee pro, and Steve, there's Steve and Steven here. So Steven Vick is joining us. He's a coffee pro in Chicago.
We'll just go by last name.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We'll call them Vic and Reinhardt. That's confusing because we also know another coffee pro named Reinhardt. So.
Steve, you were on last night, weren't you?
Yeah, I was.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, it's been great. This is my best method of getting down to New York right now.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about how this is all working out. I think we're going to try to do these on a somewhat regular basis even after this event because it's a really cool way to get people together and talk about stuff.
Are you a barista, Steve?
I used to be. I'm now one of those all too common home coffee geeks that you know. I'm everywhere on the internet. I read, I blog, I do all that.
Cool. That's not too common at all, man. We need more people like that.
Well,
you know? I mean, that's part of the point.
I seem to find it's more common than meeting like actual professional baristas as far as people that I meet and talk to.
Cool.
Well, so definitely there's a bunch of people watching who are just sort of not in. So
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that we thought we'd establish as kind of a theme for this conversation. All the Hangouts have had themes so far, and this one we'll talk about like the way that the coffee got to the serving point. In other words, the place it came from, etc. That was a big part of what I was involved in Coffee Common was kind of checking out these coffees, learning about the stories that were behind them, and they're different for each of the 5 coffees that are serving at this Coffee Common. That's something that we did at the first Coffee Common too, is kind of look backwards at these coffees and see where they come from. And I think for most of the baristas and the attendees too, I think that's part of the interesting thing about coffee. I mean, one thing is of course the way that it tastes and that impact, but there's a background to all these coffees too, and that story is at least part of what makes these coffees and these roasters special. So in this case, for this week, the coffees that they're dealing with are from kind of a variety of different places and farmers. One comes from Gimme Coffee in upstate New York, where you're from, Reinhardt. And it comes from the country of Honduras, a farm called El Sauce, which looks exactly like the sauce. But the interesting thing about that coffee, it's really delicious, wonderful coffee. That was a coffee that was actually kicked out of the Cup of Excellence competition of that year in Honduras. And the coffee buyer for Gimme Coffee loved the coffee and didn't want to say goodbye to it, so she sought out the farmer of the coffee after the contest, and now for 2 years has been buying the coffee. There's sort of a similar story with the coffee from Ritual. Ritual's coffee comes from kind of a very dangerous part of the world, and which is in Colombia. And in a place called Huila, Colombia, and it's a small farmer, and it's kind of a similar story. Ritual's coffee buyer kind of sought out the producer of this coffee and has over the last couple of years developed a relationship with this farmer and has become a solid supporting buyer of this coffee. Intelligentsia coffee, on the other hand, is a completely different kind of model. This is a group of small farmers in Bolivia. This is a coffee that comes from a number of different small farmers, rather than like in the Gimme Coffee, it comes from a single farm in Honduras, whereas Angilanaka from Intelligentsia comes from a number of small farmers that were collected at a mill. Stephen, did you ever visit that?
No, I never made it there. I've never been to Bolivia.
Yeah. So that's another model that shares some similarities with the coffee from Counterculture, my company, which comes from a group of small farmers in southern Ethiopia, and who have organized themselves into a co-op, and it's the co-op that is the producer of that coffee. And then finally we have the
And what's the name of that co-op, Peter?
It's called YCFCU, Yirgacheffe Coffee Farmers Cooperative Union, which Stephen knows well. It's a very well-known coffee cooperative in kind of the best coffee country in Ethiopia. But specifically, that coffee comes from a washing station, one individual washing station called Haru. And then the last coffee that I'll mention comes from Hart Coffee Roasters, and Hart is a newer coffee company and hasn't yet established this kind of thing about going out and seeking out coffee. And what they've done is partnered with a coffee importing company to help them get access to this coffee from Puerto Verde, which is a farm in Guatemala. And I think right now people from Hart are making their first trip to interact. So that's the sort of birth of this kind of relationship.
And I spent some time in Ethiopia last year with Wile from Hart as well.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
So what you have here is kind of a spectrum of different kinds of farms, different kinds of sourcing methods, and different kind of production too. So hopefully people are interested in kind of learning more about that and having that sort of conversation go along with the coffee. Stephen, you have anything to add to anything that I just mentioned?
No, I'm glad you caught me up on what coffees were being served because I didn't know.
Yeah, sorry about that. We're going through the list of sponsors and coffees and baristas and everything for the blog and the website as we get them. So we're just starting to get it up there. So I think just before this chat started, Brian posted the little piece about the counterculture coffee that we have, it's coming together. Man, this is like insane. Hold on a second. I'm just gonna lift this camera up real quick and like you guys can just like look over my shoulder. Just hang on 1 second and take a look at this.
Wow, that's crazy.
Oh my God. It's a lot of interest. I'm glad.
Yeah.
It's good to see that.
Cool.
It's really fantastic. We've gotten more, I think, more feedback from this event, like online as it's happening, than anything yet. It's really kind of inspiring.
Yeah.
Really inspiring. And I think just to add to what Peter said, it is, when people find out I work in the coffee industry, I think that a lot of people understand this part of it, about what's happening at Coffee Common. I think people are starting to understand more the care that needs to be taken in brewing the coffee, and that the barista is very important. But every single coffee has a story, and you can't generalize even a single country, let alone whoa, there's another person. You can't really generalize a single country, let alone coffee in general. And I think it's interesting to have such a mix of coffees and really understand that the path they took. Well, they all started as a cherry. The way that cherry was handled by the person who owned it, and through every step before the roaster gets it, is completely different from the time that it's picked. In every case, whether it's grown on a small, larger estate farm or on a quarter acre of land in Ethiopia.
Steve Reinhardt, from your perspective, you've been a coffee professional at one time, and now you describe yourself as a sort of, I don't know, semi-pro or a coffee geek. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's your take? I mean, it seems like you probably buy coffee from some of these roasters, other roasters too.
Right.
And what's your perception, or your, how important to you is knowing about the place the coffee comes from, et cetera?
Well, I'm a home roaster too, so origin and any information I can get about the beans, like when I'm buying green, definitely matters. Like it's hugely important to me, especially in terms of freshness, because I don't necessarily have a high volume. So if I buy 2 pounds, I might be holding on to it for 4 or 5 months. So I want to make sure that it's not like, already 6 months old or something.
Sure.
But yeah, when I'm buying retail roasted coffee, I do like to know, more about it than it's, I don't know, like a Guatemala. I prefer to know where the farm is. So, if I'm like, wow, this is really good, maybe I can see who else roasted something like this. That very generic, Guatemala coffee, at this point I understand enough to know that a Guatemala is not a Guatemala. And same goes across the board. There's so much that can happen from, growing to roasting that will create a completely different cup. So yeah. I mean, I don't necessarily need to know what elevation or the farmer's dog's name, but I do like to see that roasters will recognize and give attribution to the people who are actually growing the raw material.
Eric, I have to take this really quick second and compliment you on your T-shirt.
Yeah, I'm doing that in solidarity with you guys. In New Orleans, I'm a far way away, but wish I was there.
Well, you could get in a car right now and be here by tomorrow afternoon, right?
That would be awesome.
Yeah, I think one thing that you just mentioned, I think, is something that is sometimes overlooked when we start talking about this. Well, first of all, you mentioned elevation. I joke about that a lot. Like, who in the world needs to know about, that matters to coffee buyers for sure, the elevation. Right. But it's become habitual for coffee companies to like put that as the information, some of the data on their thing, and like meaningless to consumers. So that's kind of a joke of for me anyway, of like when information maybe goes a little bit too far, like you were saying, the farmer's dog. On the other hand,
sorry.
Sure. I was just going to finish. On the other hand, one thing I've noticed about using the coffee's real name, like the actual name of the farm and the farmer and stuff like that, one of the advantages of that is to the farmer, who may have never seen the name of their farm or their cooperative or their village on a package that's in the United States for sale, or in Europe or in Japan or whatever for sale, and that's a huge thing sometimes for people. I know it was a big deal the first time I had roasted coffee, and I gave it to my parents and said, I roasted this, and I think there's that same sense of recognition that can go along when you list a farm's name or whatever. I'm sorry, Eric, I interrupted you.
Oh, no, that's okay. It kind of went along with this topic as far as labeling and what goes on bags. I was curious about harvest dates, and I like knowing that information, and I appreciate that counterculture, which is you, and intelligentsia, and roasters like Barismo actually have the harvest dates on the bags. And this has been a big debate lately. Is that too much information? Do we need to know that? And I sort of feel like for roasters that aren't necessarily the high-profile cream of the crop, it's important for people to know in case they're buying really old coffees. And I just think that's a cool thing, and I'd like to push more roasters to add them, at least on their website, but even better on the bag like you do.
Anybody else have some thoughts about that? That is a little bit of controversy these days. Go ahead, Steve.
I agree. I mean, I think it's a tough one. I mean, I think that the harvest day is important, but I also think people can dwell on it too much, a little bit. I feel that, I've had coffees that were harvested within 6 months and not stored properly, and they still didn't taste good. I've had coffees that are 2 years old and were frozen and thawed properly, and you could have fooled me and told me it was harvested 3 months ago. So I think it's an important factor. I think that so many companies are innovating what they're doing. That's certainly viable and certainly important. It certainly leads to seasonality, but I feel like just because a coffee was harvested 6 months ago also doesn't automatically mean that that coffee is going to be good or was handled well in those 6 months from the time that it was picked.
Right. I would agree with that. Just even from a consumer standpoint, and I just want to say that on the Coffee Geek forums, I spend a lot of time there. We generally help people diagnose problems by getting them to stop overthinking it and just be like, how does it taste? If you think there's this problem with temperature, or you don't think it's fresh coffee, how does it taste to you, and do you like it? So the same kind of reasoning can go with information provided on the bags. Is what level of transparency do you really need? Well, how does it taste, and what is going to end up impacting your perception of that coffee in the end?
I think that's a really valuable and interesting piece, and it's something that's coming up here in a number of different questions that people are asking again and again and again. And I think that people are sort of surprised at the answer that's coming up, because there's people asking questions like, well, should I be using 28 grams or 29 grams of this, or should I be using, lots of really specifics, and of course the baristas are answering that by saying, well, taste it, and which one do you like better? And people are like, oh, right, I can make this as specific to my taste. It's not that there's something that you have to adapt to. Stephen actually, I think Stephen Morrissey here spoke about that a bit yesterday when he was doing a hangout, and he was sort of noting that with beer or wine, what comes in the bottle is what you get, that's it. But with coffee, you can really dial every little bit of it in if you want it to be a little bit stronger, or you want to bring out more of a certain kind of flavor. Just changing a little bit about how you prepare it, you can make all that difference, and it's not ever right or wrong on that end. It's really you can make what you like.
And that's awesome. That's what's awesome about coffee. But I think that's a huge thing, as to something that's led to a challenge for our industry, is that we can't go to Whole Foods. I could walk out of Coffee Common and walk to Whole Foods and easily find a bottle of wine that I'm sure they're selling now and then for $150. And people don't really think twice, a lot of people might think twice. But someone thinks, $150 bottle of wine, it must be really great. But, you could open that bottle of wine, you could pour it into a mason jar, and it's going to taste arguably exactly the same as it would taste if it were poured into the proper tasting vessel. But you can't buy a $50 bag of coffee and cut it open and drink it. And that's why I think people hesitate at the $50 pound of coffee, or $60 or $70 or $80 pounds of coffee. It's not crazy, but there's that extra step that I think from the consumer's perspective, if they're not going to be able to do what their barista can do, they're not going to spend the money necessarily, that much money, if they can't just open it up and down it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. And I think, we were just talking about, Eric, your point about more information is better. I think, that's one approach. That's certainly one approach that I've taken with my copy labels and stuff. But there's another edge to that sword. We were talking about, Sean and I, in the lead up to this event, we're talking a lot about what the implications of that in an event like they're doing in New York today, which is all about bringing great coffee to people who may never have experienced that before.
Hi, Corey. You made it.
Hey, Corey. Welcome, man.
I'm here.
Nice to see you, brother.
All right. Sorry about that. Go ahead, Peter.
So one of the things that we risk doing when we're talking about altitude and harvest dates and taste notes and organic agriculture and how much the farmer was paid and all that stuff, that data can sometimes come across like a fire hose to a consumer, and they just get knocked over by too much stuff before they even have a chance to indulge in the simple joy of tasting something that's delicious. And what do we want them to focus on? Do we want them to focus on how to, the differences between 29 grams and 30 grams, what the flavor impact that is, or the difference between, a co-op and an estate farm, or the difference between, different roasting protocols or whatever. I mean, it's one of the beauty of coffee is that it's so complicated, and it also can be the most alienating part of it.
Yeah. And especially as we get more educated, I feel like I've witnessed some barista trainers more recently who start their training off with explaining TDS to novices, to brewing them a 1.3 TDS coffee versus a 1.45% extraction yield TDS coffee, and I just don't know in the first 10 minutes if that's really where you should start with coffee with someone.
Well, so the way that this all translates into what's happening today and here at this New York event is Park, one of the baristas that we had yesterday, noted, and I'm not a barista myself, so this isn't something I ever think about or it's never something that would cross my mind. But he was saying about that when you're working at a cafe, there's kind of like this perfect customer that comes in rarely, maybe once a day or every other day or something, who really wants to sort of engage and talk to you about what you're serving and get a little bit of feedback and stuff. And it doesn't happen that often, but when it does, it's really fantastic. And that here, every single person that comes up to the counter is that perfect customer. So they sort of like have to be on their toes like 100% of the time, which is really exciting for them. And I think that part of the reason for that is that when we were sort of planning this all out, we put a $5 door price at the door because we wanted all of the coffee inside to be free. We wanted sort of the experience to just be removed from money once you got inside. And people just sort of be able to like take their time and like mill around and just try all sorts of different things without thinking about anything else but what they were trying. And so having that, just that tiny little barrier at the door instantly prevents anybody who doesn't care from coming in, because they're like, $5 to walk inside, forget it, not interested. I'm going to walk down the street and pay $5 for a cup of coffee where I don't have to talk to anybody, And then here, they're just paying at the door, and they're already interested, they're already engaged, and so like, I keep like carrying this around and showing it, but this room is just like buzzing, and everybody is talking about coffee in all of these different corners and all these different things they're trying out, and they're really excited about it. And then we're seeing online as they leave, like on Twitter and like everywhere else, they're like messaging all of their friends like, oh my God, this is the most amazing thing. Like, you have to come down here right away and try this coffee out. So it's like there's this piece that lures them in, and then once they're inside, then it's like all of these other pieces they get to learn about. It's fantastic.
I think that's cool too for Corey. Hi, Corey. What? Come on, you got on from Uganda. You have something to say.
Well, I've got a question.
Yeah, no, listen. Yeah. No, I was curious. I mean, these questions that are coming, so I've, for those of you that don't know me, and I've been living in East Africa for the last 5 years, I'm curious, are people really more focused on the sort of like technique of coffee on the roasting and preparation side, or are they really digging into, sort of origin, how, whether things are wet processed, naturals? I'm sort of curious what the consumer questions are that you guys are seeing.
Well, at this event specifically, there's a lot of talk about process, because that's just kind of what we set up. We wanted to we're not serving any espresso. We're only serving pour over coffee. So we sort of what we were trying to do was just create an environment where anybody who walked in could sort of walk away with a little bit of information that could make whatever they were doing at home better. But ideally that sort of draws them in to learn more. So there's certainly all kinds of conversations going on, but I think just because of the way that we have things set up, there's a lot of process talk happening kind of inside here. But
and I think he means
what are the questions
you mean like brewing process, not wet process versus natural,
Right, exactly. We have one bar, that's just like, an AeroPress and a Chemex and a grinder that people can just like go up and play with, because, there's some people who are coming in who are like, I have a blade grinder and I've never seen a burr grinder in my life, and what is the difference between a fine and a coarse grind? So just being able to like play with that, that gives them something to think about. So there's definitely a bit of focus on that end piece just at this event specifically in here right now.
Yeah, cool. Very cool.
Yeah, Sean and I kind of had this long conversation, this animated email conversation back and forth with each other, talking about how much we should be prepared to talk about, like before the roaster part, how germane that was to the conversation and what we were trying to do, whether that would support or distract what we were really trying to do, which was stimulate interest in these coffees and educate people about what coffee really was. And, I'm curious from this group, like, what our thoughts are about that. We've got a diversity of people in this. We've got people, Stephen and Corey, who have done a lot of work at Coffee Origin. We've got Eric, who's a coffee educator. We've got Steve, who's a coffee pro / coffee geek. Yeah. So what are your thoughts about that? How much should we be talking about that, or how much should we be letting it just fade into the background?
Well, I think it depends on.
I think it's yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll let the pro talk first.
Oh no, there are no pros here. I think it's incredibly important. I mean, it's how the coffee is processed at origin and sort of where it. I guess the topic of this is sourcing. I mean, it's again, to use the obvious case, Ethiopia. Depending on where you are and how things are processed, the coffees are just remarkably different. And I think that to really educate consumers on or help, I guess, rather than say educating, to help consumers learn and discover what they like best. I think sort of an understanding of origin processing method is really where the coffees are coming from, and it's extraordinarily important. You look at the differences in origins, between origins, then how things are done in each origin. There's just a mind-blowing, and I guess back to where I sort of came in as you guys might have been talking about this. The amount of data is mind-blowing, but I think that some basic level of information on this is quite important. I don't know. I'm biased though.
Steve Reinhardt, what were you going to say?
Well, so I tend to be quite more into coffee than everybody around me. So I will get a lot of questions, or I'll make coffee for somebody and they'll be like, "Wow, why is this so different?" So I'll start with the obvious things, like I tend to brew way more fresh coffee than, I brewed coffee for a professor of mine. He's like, well, I use a Keurig machine. Why does this taste different? I was like, well, I ground this about 2 minutes before I brewed it, so, there's one thing for you. So I just feel like throwing everything out there from like, well, here's the list of 150 reasons plus why, my coffee tastes different and or better than yours. That's just way too much. It's an avalanche, and it's totally just going to blow people over, and they're not even going to be interested anymore. So if you answer their questions first, and then sort of lead them into additional curiosities. So like, yes, my coffee's fresher, but I also roasted this myself, and it's beans that I bought from Sweet Maria's. I thought that they would probably be a good quality, and it's probably not what you see in your K-cups. So I think that treating the customers, addressing their interests and their curiosities, and then sort of trying to nudge them in the right direction as far as what further questions to ask or what other things they should look for is a good approach, rather than just being like, oh, by the way, this is dry process and this is what it means. So
what, for the sake of discussion here, and since we're Coffee Common, I'm going to try to get a little provocative here. What we all know, I think probably all of us know enough about coffee to know that it has this colonial history, and unfortunately, literal exploitation has been part of the coffee industry's history, in the past 200 years. So, and we all, I think, are aware that exploitation and poverty and disenfranchisement exist in coffee, but not everywhere in coffee. There are bright spots in this, and there's a whole continuum of this. To what extent do we talk about this in the story of like this super delicious coffee that we're working with on the West Side today? Is this a topic that we want to get into, or do we want to leave it alone?
I think we have to get into it.
Yeah,
I feel like it has to be approached in the right way. There's so many steps to the process that I've found that in events like this that I've been a part of, where the focus is on tasting, is that even having something tangible like some dried coffee pods, some coffee and parchment, some green coffee on display, people start to talk. People start to ask questions just because they're able to touch this original thing, the raw product, where it came from. That even just putting those things out, people will start to ask questions about, whoa, wait, there's something before this that we didn't know about,
Yeah, it's definitely a topic that we're talking about here, because part of with Coffee Common is we're removing a bit of the brand aspect to it, right? Like we're not saying, oh well, here's the here's the counterculture and here's the ritual and here's this. We have you can tell where it is, and where the stuff's coming from, and we have beans available. But at the bars, we're saying, well, this is the Guatemala that we have, and this is the Bolivia that we have, and this is where the story of the farm where this came from, and so that's being talked about with the people as they're trying it, as opposed to, oh well, this is just coming from this place or from this brand.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it has to be talked about. In the end, people are talking about it. When I tell people I'm in coffee and I buy, sell, trade coffee, the first question out of people's mouths are, well, is that fair trade? And it's, there are many sort of directions that you can answer that question. You can go, but for better or for worse, fair trade has elevated this to the consumer's consciousness, and it has to be addressed, absolutely.
Oh yeah, the issue of fair trade has come up again and again and again here, because there are people who that's the only thing they've ever heard, and so they assume, well, if it's fair trade, then obviously everything's perfect, and so it's been a really sort of great opening for those conversations to happen, and especially with something like, let me see if I can show you this really quickly. Hold on. At this bar, the one that's right. That's directly behind me. That's the taste bar, and that's where we're serving everything that we have right now, all at once, prepared the same way, so that right when people walk in the door, they can. People don't usually go to a coffee shop and say, "Give me one of everything," right? Even if the coffee shop has different source beans, they might have a cup of one thing and then leave, and then 3 or 4 days later come back and get something else from a different place, but they're not having them close enough to try it, next to each other. So there's a lot of people who don't recognize the difference between these things. And so at a bar like this, where everyone can come and get, a small little taste of the 7 different coffees that we've chosen for this, right next to each other, that instantly sparks all of these discussions about where it's from and why does this taste different, and how does this relate to the one next to it. And so it's a really, really wonderful way. And again, this is right when people walk in the door. So it's a really great way to sort of get all of these conversations rolling just, the second people are inside.
And I think more collaboration like this is really important. Having someone like Corey, I mean, it's interesting having, worked in the U.S. for a while for roasters and doing that sort of thing, and then going to East Africa and working with people who've worked in coffee for a number of years, and they have. I remember sitting around in Kigali, Rwanda, and showing a video of the siphon, the slow bar, and intelligentsia to like a group of people who worked in coffee, and we were all like drinking and listening to music, and all of a sudden the music got shut off, and they were like, "You do this with coffee? That is insane!" Like people, I could guarantee you that there's maybe, other than Corey, 5 other people in East Africa who work in coffee that know Coffee Common exists. I mean, honestly.
Sure, no,
and there's thousands of people who work in coffee and work with farmers every day, and they often don't know about this end of coffee, and they're in the industry. So just as our consumers don't know about what's happening there, a lot of people working in coffee, as farmers especially, every farmer would meet with in Ethiopia in Jimma last year and explain what it is that Intelligentsia did and all of that and what we're doing there. Their answer after the whole presentation would be like, "Oh, so you guys are trying to be like Starbucks." And in their mind, the pinnacle, that's the pinnacle.
Right.
And it's crazy that literally coffee professionals, there's probably not many outside of Corey who even know that this is happening right now.
Well, so let me, and this is a good place for me to say something. And one of the interesting pieces of Coffee Common, I think, is that we're sort of like a multi-headed monster. We're kind of like the Hydra here, in that we have a group of people that we've come together for this sort of sole purpose. But we have different opinions on things, and we talk about those opinions with each other. But we have different sort of motivations and different things that are going into it, and we're all sort of like we're all trying to make something better. We're all trying to kind of like make this better. And we have different reasons and angles to do that, but we want the same result in the end. And so for me, like, I'm not in the coffee industry, and personally, I don't care about the coffee industry. Like, I'm not interested in changing the coffee industry because I know in the whole rest of my life that changing industry is really difficult. But what you can do is just completely skip over the industry and educate people, and then the people will force the industry to change. And so I think that that's a really, really important piece for me, is getting all these normal people who are around to know about the stuff that we're talking about, and to know about things that usually only coffee industry people know about, so that they can go to the cafes that they go to usually and ask these kinds of questions, right? Like someone who comes in here who learns about sourcing and learns about where these beans comes from, who maybe doesn't get coffee at a specialty coffee shop usually. Maybe they just get coffee, from their, whatever coffee shop is between their house and the train station in the morning. And for them to now, maybe tomorrow or next week, go and ask them, "Hey, I had this really fantastic experience this weekend. Tell me about the beans that you're serving here." Then those shops are going to have to start answering these questions, and that's how this change is going to happen from the other direction, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the best thing, I think the best thing to get money into farmers is, like you said, get consumers to demand, better coffees from the counterculture, Stumptown and Telly, et cetera, people who are paying actually reasonable prices for the coffee. And, seeing, as someone who sees on a daily basis, the impact of more money being paid for coffee, it's frankly the only way to address those colonial inequities or whatever the exploitation that Peter was referring to earlier, I think.
Yeah.
There's
Corey,
two things. Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead. No, you go ahead, Eric.
Well, I wanted to touch on a few things, and I guess they're two different topics, but they were mentioned. Definitely, I think consumers are concerned about, ethics in coffee, and I know that fair trade that's what everybody knows about, and we know it has its downfalls. And I think as just a home geek, I'm sort of under the assumption that the direct trade model, is ethical on that end in the same way it is, but then also has that element of quality that I'm looking for. I've had so many bad fair trade coffees that fair trade isn't going to do it for me, and I think that's what's been communicated just to me as a home coffee geek. And then what I'm curious about, though, is the companies that are awesome that don't have, the roasters that are awesome that don't have the direct trade model. To be honest with you, and I guess I haven't thought about this enough, are there avenues for consumers to find out about ethics of importers, just green importers, where they're getting their coffees from? Because I wouldn't really know where to look to that unless I really did some in-depth research into where the coffee was imported from, who was the importer, and that kind of thing.
That's a fantastic question, and I don't know, but Peter, is there a way to find something out other than what people sort of volunteer?
No.
Once they stop talking about it, it's out of the question, right?
Right. And I think this is a really interesting, that, Eric, is this really interesting thing because, we've spent a lot of time, all of us in this group probably, talking about, or a lot of the roasters, that are in the Coffee Commons thing have talked about the kind of the shortcomings of fair trade. But my perspective is that direct trade is actually an evolution of fair trade. It's a child of fair trade. This awareness came first, and then this other thing that we call direct trade came second. But the weakness of most of the people that are doing direct trade is, and something that fair trade does, is this sort of certified, audited supply chain. And that's something that we don't have in direct trade. So while you have roasters that talk about, these details and stuff like that, it's coming from them and it may have its own spin. And then, as you say, there's this whole group of people called importers that people might as well pretend doesn't exist. They're like the invisible actors in the coffee trade, and all of us that work in the trade know about the differences between the various importers and multinationals versus private exporters and importers and reputations, and we can recognize the clues that are between coffees that are likely to be ethically sound and coffees that are unlikely to be ethically sound. But and that came up in this year's Coffee Common too. What do you do about roasters who buy coffee from importers? And how nobody would say that can't be kind of a fair and equitable deal for everybody. But everyone would acknowledge that could also be dicey. It's it's right now. There's no way for you to know anything except for those coffees that are certified.
And I'm sort of under the assumption. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, like Peter said, direct trade has no rules. There are no rules. It's every company. I visited a new coffee roaster in a rural town in Oregon, and he had a direct trade coffee, and I asked him about that, and he had the opportunity to shake the farmer's hand at the FCA convention, and so he called that direct trade. But I also think that, that there are no rules, and I think that it's changing. It's constantly changing. It is a child, and it's evolving. Everyone's big sort of direct trade stickler a couple years ago was the price. We're paying twice the fair trade price. We're trading twice the sea market price. Nobody's paying that much more anymore. I mean, that's the fact of the matter, is that roasters who are doing a good thing are paying a pretty close, a little bit higher of a price than roasters who aren't. That's because the sea market's really high. And then direct trade really focuses on quality and improvements. And so I think that the issue with it is that price was the sort of factor that everyone was riding on, and it can't be considered anymore because the C market is twice what it was, and hopefully it'll stay there, or hopefully it'll sustain itself at a place where it works for the farmers. But roasters are going to have to get more creative because hopefully we're not going to see a market at $1.20 anymore. I mean, that's not good for anybody in the end.
I was going to say, I'm under the assumption that possibly, just to wrap that end of the conversation up, if you guys want to, that there's sort of be a self-policing in the community. So, if somebody knew that there was a roaster that we all respect that's offering unethical coffees, that at some point they might not come out and say it themselves, but they would let somebody know who would then get it out there, whether that's Sprudge or whoever it would need to be. But anyway, the other thing I wanted to say that you guys touched on is just back on the, and we don't have to go here, but back on the harvest date thing. And the reason I brought it up is, just like you said, the consuming public can affect change on the roaster's behalf, like we did with roast dates. When you guys, whether you realize it or not, Counterculture and some of the bigger coffee roasters, when you guys pushed roast dates, it pushed the smaller roasters that aren't as well known to also offer roast dates on bags. And I feel like that could be something that transfers or has transferring qualities to harvest information, so that not everybody's getting old coffees. And so that if I try a Nicaragua from Counterculture and it's delicious, I don't go try one from some local roaster and just first and think that it's a horrible coffee because it's from Nicaragua. It just turns out it was old. And that's why I didn't like it. So I shouldn't hate Nicaragua. It was just an old coffee, I don't know. I'm running around here, but that's where I was going.
Yeah, well, on the self-policing thing, I would love it if I thought that were true, but I don't think it is. We're not at that point yet. Nobody's eager to kind of call out. And besides that, it's not like there's good and there's bad. Mm-hmm. There's all these. Everybody draws their line in different places for things that they want to do, and ways to do it. And what we haven't yet figured out is kind of a coherent way to talk about it.
Yeah, and that's something we've talked about a lot internally here. I mean, Peter and I have had this discussion, and we've talked about everything because, we're sort of like, okay, if there's 10 things that we all agree are the quantifiers of someone who's doing the right thing, right? And somebody's doing 9 of those. Is that bad? Or are they're trying, they're just not quite trying enough? Like what is that? And so it's a very interesting discussion. I think the most important thing is that it is being discussed. That's the best first step in this.
And there's also the two, the sides, the sourcing side and the consumer side. There's companies out there that are massive. A couple of them that do pretty good things for farmers, really good things for farmers. They have people who work full-time on their sustainability, on measuring, I'm not going to mention names, but I think Peter knows what I'm talking about, on measuring the sustainability of what they do at origin, how balanced the diets are of the farmers with whom they work at origin, and they present a really terrible product to the consumer. So they do really incredible things at origin, but would never be a part of Coffee Common because of what they end up doing with that coffee. And it's an argument because they're doing arguably some of the most impactful work at source, and then presenting the coffee in a way that the consumer will never understand that. In my opinion, it's not going to further the industry in a way that will make consumers understand that very well. That makes sense.
That actually has been talked about here very directly over the past 2 days because people are coming in and they're asking that question, right? They're saying, well, what do you think of this company?
Yeah.
And
but you know what?
They're everywhere. Are they bad?
The converse, though, is also true. There are coffees that are delicious and are like elegant, wonderful, delicious coffees that if you were to scratch the surface, go down deep in terms of where they were sourced, how they were farmed, etc., doesn't have any of that feel-good stuff. And in fact, it can be precisely the opposite, you know. And so I would love it if every roaster that was doing delicious coffees was taking responsibility for all of that stuff, but it just isn't. And there are roasters out there who are unknowingly trading in coffees that have a checkered past or a checkered background. And so it gets tricky. You know, you've got bad tasting coffee that is totally, you know, is wonderful from a sourcing standpoint, and delicious tasting coffee that is questionable from a sourcing standpoint. And then you've got those coffees that are both. And you know, and the hope is that we can through discussion, through education, through discovery, sort of let those coffees that are both sort of rise to the top and be celebrated.
Well, I kind of want to ask now that the topic has come up. The other day, Sweet Maria's tweeted something about walking through Guatemala and seeing a dead man on the street. Which just sort of speak to the condition of the country. I know there's a bit of political unrest and that kind of thing. What do coffee buyers and coffee professionals, how do you handle that kind of thing? You know, what if you're trying to do your best in a country that's just not receptive to that kind of thing? Do you think that would lead people to avoid good coffees if they're produced in a country that really just is going to have a bad reputation because of the state of, what is?
That's a really interesting question. I don't know.
Here's my take on it.
Do your best and try and make sure that people are rewarded for their coffees. I mean, we sell coffee. Yeah. Sorry, I think I have like a 9-second delay or something sitting over here. I don't know. I mean, I think that there is no easy answer. I think I think we're getting back to issues of like what is direct trade and how to ensure that benefits make it all the way down the chain. I mean, it's a tragic fact that coffee is produced in a lot of countries that are pretty messed up. I think that, again, going back to the income thing, the price, income, whatnot, the only answer is to try and get more money down in a reasonable way. Obviously, not buying, exploitative coffees, but this again gets to the tricky question, like that we were saying about importers. How do you, we just have to ask, or people need to ask questions of the importers of their roasters. I mean, it's really information. If people don't get a satisfactory answer, I'm rambling a little bit, but you need to ask questions, and if you don't get the answer you like, you look elsewhere. I mean, I don't know that we're ever going to be in a situation of perfect information where you can know, everything about your coffee and which farmer produced it on what day. I don't know. There's no easy answer. That's not answering your question at all, I know, but.
I didn't expect a direct answer anyway.
Well, I mean, more of a conversational thing. More transparency reports like Counterculture does, or is that part of the solution to go the route of transparency reports? Is it too much inside baseball?
I think absolutely no. I mean, I think price transparency is tremendously valuable. Absolutely.
I think the thing that I thought of when you mentioned that tweet that Tom mentioned, about physical, gun violence in Guatemala, and there's violence in lots of these countries because poverty breeds violence and stuff. And one thing that I truly believe, and this is the thing that keeps me in coffee more than any other, is that a prosperous coffee farm is an agent of peace. Because you can't run a prosperous coffee farm when there's violence around or serious inequity, because coffee requires investment over years, and so if you're afraid that you're going to lose your land to somebody with a gun, you're unlikely to plant coffee because, why make the investment? You're more likely to be attracted to some other cash crop or something. So I think coffee among all the possible crops that are open to somebody who's in agriculture in all these countries is more likely to foster peace and prevent somebody from lying dead on a street in Guatemala than anything. And I think that's what keeps those of us that have worked in coffee origin like motivated to do it. But I think it's really important, though, for us to keep our eye on the ball and not let ourselves be so seduced by flavor and awesome coffee things to forget that one of the important things of what we're doing is trying to promote political stability, economic prosperity, environmental improvement at the same time that we're doing the flavor thing.
It's great though. He's talking now about
I think that's possible.
Yeah. And the places I've visited multiple times over years, I mean, any good coffee, whether it's a coffee farm or a cooperative or a private washing station, if it's more than likely going to have a relationship with any of the companies that are involved in Coffee Common, they're going to be run like businesses, like sustainable. Any business that we work for, they're going to treat their workers well. They're going to pay, hey Brent, they're going to pay their workers well. And the places I've been, especially in Africa, you visit the washing station year after year, there's the same person in charge of parchment sorting. There's the same person in charge of processing. And those are the places where you know this is going to be a good relationship because they're keeping people around for a long time. You don't have a different person every time you go there. And you know, you have a better idea that that's going to be a solid place for you to do business. If they're able to keep a parchment sorter manager around for 3 seasons, they're probably a pretty good place to work, and they're probably a pretty good business partner to have as a roaster.
Hey, Brent.
How's it going, Peter?
Great. How are you doing?
We're doing great.
Man, it seems
fantastic.
All of us out here in the outer rim wish we were there.
We wish you were here too.
Yeah.
I'm going to take this out of the line and they have the line to X.
Yeah. Sean's going to take the camera outside in a second so you can see the line.
All right. Yeah, we want to. We've been having this great conversation about coffee, where coffee comes from, and the importance of all that stuff.
Awesome.
Corey, I think everybody might like to know a little bit more about your work. What your specific thing is. I think people know what my job is, but people might like to know what your job is.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I mean, up until recently, I was with TechnoServe. We were, I guess, working across Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania, and Rwanda with, farmer business groups to set up washing stations and, build these sustainable farmer businesses that Stephen referenced. So that was in many cases, it was up to probably 40,000 farmers or so across the region. But, getting people from, to break them out of the cycle of selling low-grade commercial coffee into a sort of higher-grade specialty. So my background in East Africa is that. Recently I switched gears and moved into the trade with a UK-based coffee trader, and we're also very heavily focused on the sustainable supply chains and looking at both whether it's certified coffees or here in Uganda, Rwanda, we're looking at we do project work. We set up joint ventures with exporters and sort of hunt out areas where there have been, where the coffee has maybe been undervalued or unappreciated, and work to sort of build up the quality and, drive higher prices back down to the farmers again. So, that's, for example, we're working in Western Uganda with a lot of growers out there, and we have a fund where every kilo of coffee we buy and trade, we're paying to the kingdom, to the a social fund, to an education fund, so and these are sort of the hidden things of the supply chain that are actually quite interesting when you dig into them. But trying to create sustainable coffee, but not so much that it's a different approach. It's not so that we can sell it onward and make more money, but it's because it is the right thing to do, and because it ensures that you'll be able to actually have access to the supply chain. People can sell their coffee at origin to any number of guys, and they'll make, they'll cut deals with the devil, so to speak, at times, because they need to they need to pay school fees, or they need to, need cash now, so they'll pre-sell their entire harvest. So it's, and that destroys the quality, because then people just strip pick and, do all sorts of things that, once they don't own their coffee, who cares what the quality is. So trying to really build strong supply chains that are quality focused, and the only way to do that is to ensure that farmers are getting more money in their pocket. So, we as a private company strongly believe that. And it's, we're doing this in, like I said, Rwanda, Uganda, Nicaragua, here, there. But it's fascinating work, and it's really fun to go out and find new coffees and create new coffees, not from scratch, because the coffee is there, but, taking it from people drying it in the middle of the road with goats and trucks and whatever walking all over it, to washing it and seeing farmers get more money. I mean, I think it's fascinating, and it's, me personally, it's why I love coffee.
That's fantastic.
I think for some of us too, and the work that Corey does, is one of the largest challenges in East Africa is the logistics of it all, the processing being right, but also the farmers, for them to understand the quality that they even have. And in these situations where they'll pre-contract the entire farm, they might not ever understand the quality of the coffee that they have. The best coffee I tasted in Rwanda last year, I scored a 92. Ended up at a warehouse type chain of stores in the U.S. that starts with a C and ends with a Co. And that was only because of how much.
What company are you talking about, Stephen?
But it's just interesting that for buyers, I mean, arguably, there's a lot of roasters who have good relationships. But I would say right now, the best way to get the best coffee in East Africa is to be there all the time and taste it. It's almost like you're trying to be at the right place at the right time, and a lot of that is just an education gap. People don't understand the quality. They don't know how to evaluate the quality. So someone comes by and says, "Oh, here's the price. I want it all." They're like, "Okay, let's sell it all." And then Peter or myself or whomever comes by and says, "Oh, where'd that coffee that go? We would have paid you a lot more." And they're like, we had to sell it. And that's a pretty common problem, where some of the best coffees are actually getting bulked into large bulks that people like us will never ever taste.
All right. Well, hey, we've been doing this for a little over an hour, so I think I want to cut it off, and then we'll do another one in a little bit, maybe later today or tomorrow morning again. Before I do that, though, I wanted to just pick up my laptop and run outside in the snow, so all of you people who are not snowed in can say hi to the people who are outside shivering, waiting to come inside.
Cool.
I'm gonna unplug my headset and microphone, so it might get a little loud. I'm gonna apologize about that ahead of time. Okay, hang on.
Thanks, Sean.
Okay, so.
Whoa. I just got motion sick.
Sorry.
Oh, boo! I think we lost the wireless signal.
Yeah. I'm not seeing
Well,
anything.
for the record, I have the second best T-shirt on in our group here.
I'm wearing my Gimme Happy Roaster today.
Oh, look at that.
Oh, yeah. Cool.
I wish it was snowing in New Orleans. It's 79 degrees.
Oh, my goodness.
All right, y'all.
I'm not sure it's going to snow here anytime soon.
All right, guys.
Thanks,
So
y'all.
it's been nice talking
Thank
to you
you.
guys.
Thank y'all.
All right. See you later. Peace.
Bye.
All right, guys. See ya. Take care.